Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be using the new Patrick Ta palette. I'm a little bit late with this, but you know I was going to do a video on this. I love Patrick Ta, I love his products, and I love his eyeshadow palette. So this was personally a no-brainer purchase for me because I love his products and I'm so excited to try this palette with you. I have not swatched it or anything. I did open it up and look at it when I got it, but that is it. So this will be my first impression. I'll also, of course, give you thoughts on the formula. Do I think it's worth it? Is it the same as his other eyeshadow palette formulas? How does it compare to the Makeup by Mario? I know that's kind of what everyone has been talking about. And that's what we're going to be doing today. If you are new here, my name is Blair. I do all kinds of beauty and makeup content here on YouTube. I hope you'll subscribe and let's get into it. All right, so let's get into it. So this is the box, standard Patrick Ta box that all of his eyeshadow palettes come in. If you have been around my channel for a while, you will know one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes in my collection ever is the Major Dimension Volume 1. So his original palette, the more bronzy, warm neutrals. That one is my favorite. I also have Volume 2, which is more rosy. And I love his palettes. I personally love his eyeshadow formula. I was very happy to see that the front of this is not mirrored. It's like the matte finish, so you can avoid all the fingerprints, because that is definitely a con of his packaging in general. It's beautiful, but it is that rose gold mirrored packaging, which gets a ton of fingerprints on it. Very hard to keep clean. And there is the palette. It has a mirror. I'm not going to remove this because it'll blind you if I do, but it's an all matte palette, half warm tones, half cooler tones. And you get two cream shadows as you do with his other palettes. So you get the brown and the black cream in this palette as well, which I love that he does. I think that really sets his eyeshadow palettes apart from a lot of other ones that you see on the market. I love that he does that. I've seen kind of mixed things on this palette. For me, like I said in the intro, I was gonna buy it no matter what it was. He typically releases palettes around this time every year, and I knew he was going to release one, and for me, I will buy it regardless because I love him and I love his palettes. But yes, it is an all matte palette. Is it like the most exciting, sparkly, glittery, all these different finishes palette? No. But it is beautiful. It is beautiful, and I love that it's half cool and half warm tones. I feel like you typically see predominantly cool or predominantly warm palettes. There's not a ton out there that give you a little bit of both. All right, let's do some swatches. I will make sure I do timestamps for this video, so if you don't want to see the swatches, you can skip ahead to the looks. If you want to see the swatches, you can stay here and skip the looks if you want, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to go ahead and swatch this palette for you. Now, I'm sorry, I'm really not the best swatcher, but I know people really like to see swatches, so I'm going to swatch the two creams for you. So they are, his cream shadows in his original two palettes are extremely pigmented, and I would say these are the same. So that's the black, and that's the brown. Super creamy, super pigmented. So what I envision using those for is eyeliner. I love to use a cream shadow like that for like a winged liner, and then set it with a little bit of powder shadow. So I love that he included a basic brown and black in here. All right, I'm gonna start swatching the top row, which are the warmer colors. All right, so we have the darkest warm matte, second darkest, third darkest, fourth darkest, and the lightest on the top. So we have the creams and the top row. All right, moving on to the bottom row. So we have the I'm running out of room here, so I gotta go all the way down my arm. All right, so we got the black, the brown, medium, cool brown, taupey shade, and then last shade is the white shade. The black swatched a little bit strange, but it's not the palette. I had one of these wipes sitting here. I rubbed my fingers, and then before I wiped my finger off to get that wet residue off, I stuck it in the black shadow, and that definitely kind of messed with the top of the formula, so I just had to kind of scrape that off. So if you see that swatching weird as compared to these, that's why, because I just got some makeup remover in there and it did something weird. So I'm gonna have to fix that. But I would say based on the swatches, they feel like his Major Dimension 1 and his Major Dimension 2 palettes. I have never had any difficulty with his mattes before, so I'm assuming these will be the same. Obviously, we'll see how they apply on my eyes, but I personally love his matte eyeshadow formula. I find it really comparable to Natasha Denona matte eyeshadows. I have no trouble blending with them. They're very buildable, soft, and very smooth. This palette is $69 for 10 matte shades and 2 cream shadows. Let's get started with look number one. Look number one, I'm just gonna do like what I would use this for if I was doing a very, very everyday look. So not using the creams in this one, just a few of probably the lighter shades. So I'm gonna take this shade here, which is the lightest in the warm row, which is on the top. And it's kind of like an ivory color. And I'm gonna put this all over to start. So I primed my eyes with Rare Beauty eyeshadow primer. So I'm just gonna put that all over. Then I'm gonna go into the next shade down, which is this one here. Just like a light warm brown. And I'm gonna apply this in the crease. Yeah, I mean, do you see the way these apply is just so nice, you guys. They're very velvety. Nothing to say there other than it's a really pretty neutral. I would say it's warm, but it's not like orange. Warm, has some warmth, but it's not crazy. Blend is perfection. All right, then I'm gonna go down to this shade here, which is the more cool toned, lighter brown taupey shade. There is a lot of kick up in the pan. Just want to point that out. You see that, like just from where I stuck my brush in. That doesn't bother me personally, but I just want to throw that out there. Switched to a little bit of a smaller, more tapered brush. And I'm going to apply this in the outer corner. I personally love to mix cool and warm shades with eyeshadow looks. I don't know why. I don't always stick to like all cool or all warm, so I really appreciate that there's both in this palette. Honestly, this is like perfect every day to me, but you could also take this white, use this under the brow. I know a lot of people love doing that. A white shade is always kind of a nice thing to have, and then you could also, ooh, that's a nice white, actually. I'm kind of putting it in this inner corner, dragging it up a little bit, just to add a little bit of that bright color right in this inner corner. I don't know if it will show on camera, but that is a really nice white shadow. And then if you wanted to, you could take your blending brush and just blend around a little bit more. I know this is super basic, but like on a daily basis, this is the kind of eyeshadow look I would wear. I'm gonna go ahead and do my base makeup. I'll come back and we will finish up the little bit on the lower lash line, and that'll be it for look number one. for the lower lash line, we're gonna keep it really, really simple. And I'm just gonna mix a little bit of these two transition shades here. So the one that we put in the crease and then the one we applied in the outer corner. I'm just taking a little bit of both shades, like one tap of each. And that's it, super easy. This is a very daytime appropriate quick look. So I'm gonna finish the rest of my makeup and I will be back. Okay, this is the completed look number 1. Obviously, very simple, very basic. Do you have to use this palette for this type of eye look? No, you definitely don't. But the shadows applied beautifully. This is super natural, a little bit of the cool and a little bit of the warm shades mixed together. I think it's just the perfect neutral everyday eye look. Okay. We're gonna get started with look number 2. So I'm thinking for this one, I'm gonna use the warmer shades in here, and then for look 3, we'll do the cooler shades. So I'm gonna start with the creamy kind of beigey color up here, and I'm gonna apply this all over on the lid and all the way up to the brow bone. I did prime my eyes with the Rare Beauty eyeshadow primer. Then I'm gonna go into this next shade here, which is like the lighter brown transition shade. And I'm gonna apply this all over. So I'm gonna put it on the lid and then kind of pull it up into the crease also. And this brush is the Spectrum Katie Jane Hughes number 11 brush. It's very similar to the MAC 217, which I also really like. All right, then we're gonna go to this shade here. So I'm kind of just going up in terms of the darkness of these colors. And I switched to a 202 brush from BK Beauty. And I'm just adding that in the outer corner. This is like a, I would say like a mid-toned warm brown. Going back in and adding a little bit more on this side. That is what I really like about his shadows, is they're very buildable. So you can make them more pigmented by adding more, or you can get a very sheer wash of color if you want. All right, then I'm gonna take a little bit of both of these shades, so this one and this one, so the two darker warm browns, and I'm switching to an A502, which is even smaller from BK Beauty, because I don't want those dark colors everywhere. I really just want to keep them in this outer corner. So I'm kind of, basically the darker I go, the smaller the brush that I use. All right, now I'm gonna go back to the second shade right here. And I'm gonna use a larger, fluffier brush with that shade. I'm gonna hold it really, really far out. And I'm gonna go over the crease. So this is the shade we kind of put all over to begin with, but I'm gonna go over the crease with that shade and then very lightly kind of feather over everything else just to kind of diffuse everything. And then I'm gonna go back to the very first shade, the cream shade, and I'm gonna just put a little bit of that on this part of the lid here that doesn't really have much color, just to add a little bit more of that cream shade in kind of the inner portion of the lid. All right, now I really want to use the cream shadows for liner for this. So I'm going to go into the brown, which is here, and I'm going to use this to create a little wing, and then we may use one of the dark brown shadows to kind of set it a little bit or smudge it a little bit. So I'm gonna go with my favorite brush ever for this step, which is the 208 from BK Beauty. So I kind of went on the lash line right here, and then when I got like towards the inner part of my eye, I almost went underneath, kind of in the waterline, but kind of focusing it in between the lashes. So I'm just kind of lining, and then we'll do a little bit of a wing. Okay, so I did the liner, and the last thing I want to do is take, I was going to take the chocolate brown shadow, but I may go down one shade to this right here, this kind of mid-toned cooler brown. And I'm going to take a little bit of that with a small little pencil brush and really, really lightly go over that liner. Although I will say his cream shadows typically last a really long time, even if you don't set them. I find that they do really last, but I figured we would go ahead and set these, or this liner, just a little bit. So I'm just kind of lightly going over it with that shade, just to kind of smudge it out a little bit. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop there. So I'm gonna start my makeup. I'll be back and we'll do a little bit on the lower lash line. Okay, let's do the lower lash line now. I think I'm going to take this medium toned brown here and apply this shade kind of all over. And then I'm going to take like one dip of the two darker shades that we put in the outer corner. And I'm just gonna apply those in this outer corner, just a little tiny bit. Then I go back into the creamy shade right here. I'm gonna add a little bit more of that shade right here in this inner corner. Okay, I'm gonna finish the rest of my face and I'll be back. So this is look number 2. I love this one. I love these warmer tones. I think they're so pretty, so flattering, and they blend really well. This formula is really, really nice. So far, I'm having no issues with the product or the formula at all. I mean, they're very buttery, easy to use, easy to apply. They're very beginner friendly, I would say. If you have trouble blending or maybe you're just a beginner with eyeshadow, this formula is really nice and it's very buildable, like I said earlier, so you can get less pigment if you want, or you can keep going in and building up the intensity if that's what you're looking for. But I mean, I have to say, I love this. Yes, is it basic? Yes, it is, but this is the kind of stuff I use on a daily basis, these types of shades. And I love this warm look. I also loved the cream shadow as liner. It worked beautifully. Okay, let's get started with look number 3. So for this one, we're gonna use the cooler tone shades in the palette. And I'm also gonna start with the black cream eyeshadow. So you can obviously use these as eyeliners like we did in look number 2, but you can also use them as a base before you go in with the powder shadows. So we're gonna do something that I don't do often, but we're gonna do it, and I'm going in with the black. with a MAC 217 brush. And I'm gonna basically buff this in very, very lightly as like our base layer. And this is gonna, first of all, increase the longevity of the shadows, but it's also gonna make all the shadows you layer on top pop a little bit more. So this is not something I would do like on an everyday basis, but it is something you can do if you're doing makeup for like a special occasion or something. And his cream shadows, like I said earlier, like I barely touched the shadow. They're very, very pigmented, so you do not need a lot of them. Okay, so I've got that on lightly on both eyes. Obviously, I could build it up more and get it even darker. I'm not gonna do that, but you definitely can because I used very little of that product to get this level of color. So now we are gonna go in to this shade here, which is the lighter brown, but it's a little more of a taupe, like a cooler toned brown. And I'm going in with that same Katie Jane Hughes brush we used earlier, and I'm going really all over where we just placed that cream shadow. Okay, now I'm going in with the next shade, which is this one here. It's more of a mid-toned, cool, kind of taupey brown. And I'm gonna start building up the intensity out in this outer corner. Then switching to a really small brush. This is the A504 from BK Beauty. I'm gonna take the chocolate brown matte shadow and just kind of lightly stamp this in this outer portion of my eye, kind of like eyeliner. And then I'm gonna go back in with that first matte shade that we used with a larger, fluffier brush and lightly kind of feather over everything. Honestly, you don't really need to do this. I like a really, really diffused looking eye, and I find this is kind of the best way to do it. Just go in with little layers and blend in between. Okay, gonna go in with the black cream shadow again. And I'm gonna use a little bit of this as liner. I'm gonna use a different brush than what I normally use. This is the Katie Jane Hughes number 22. It's a really tiny little liner brush. See how this works, because I don't typically use this type of brush. I use the BK Beauty 208, but I'm just gonna kind of try this out. I don't think I like that brush for that, so I'm gonna go back in with the 208. I don't know, I have a really hard time with that type of brush for some reason. Then I'm gonna go in to the black powder and go over that liner. Okay, we're gonna stop here. So I'm gonna do some of my makeup. I'll come back and we will finish the lower lash line. Okay, let's do a little bit on the lower lash line. I'm gonna mix a little bit of this shade and this shade, so the lighter brown, the medium brown. I'm just gonna take a little bit of both shades and apply those underneath. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of the brown and the black and apply just a little bit of this in this very outer corner. Taking a little bit of the white right here, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of this to this inner corner. I'm gonna finish the makeup and I'll be back. All right, this is look number 3. Obviously, much darker, much smokier than I typically go. This is not like an everyday look, obviously, but I love how all of these colors go together. They just blend so beautifully, you guys. I mean, the quality of these shadows is impeccable in my opinion, and I feel like you could do anything you would ever need to do with this palette. You could do very soft, very everyday, like look number 1. You have the warms, you have the cools, you can mix them if you want, and you can get a pretty intense, smokier eye like this. You could go even smokier if you really built up those cream shadows. Like I did here, I applied a very, very light layer. It really intensifies the shadows that you put over top and helps your shadows last longer as well. Have to say, I do really like this look. I don't do super cool smoky eyes very often. This would definitely be more of a special occasion look for me, but I do think it's absolutely beautiful. I want to quickly kind of go over my thoughts on how this compares to other palettes that I have in my collection. So I was sitting going through my palettes. I actually don't have very many all matte palettes at all. I feel like typically we don't see a ton of palettes that are all matte. I know recently, obviously this palette was released, and then I believe Kylie Cosmetics recently released an all matte palette, but I feel like typically we don't see that often. So I don't have a lot of all matte in my collection. I do have this one, the Makeup by Mario Master Mattes, which is a great palette. I kind of want to talk about this for a second because I know a lot of people are comparing this to this, and yes, they are similar. They are neutral all matte palettes, but to me, this palette definitely has an overall very warm tone to it. I don't see a ton of cool tones here. To me, this is very warm, and it has a lot of almost golden yellow leaning shades. Like all of these here, like this top row and this shade here, they're very golden, very yellow based. You don't really get that in the Patrick Ta palette. Even the warmer shades lean more, they have more of an orange base to them, not like super orange, but they do have just an orangey reddish kind of base as opposed to more of a yellow base. So I feel like they don't, I don't know, when I think of them, I don't think of them the same. Like, you'll have to see. So this is obviously, to me, this is warmer. This is kind of, it's more neutral because you get a little bit of both. But I want to swatch a few things and compare them to this new palette. In the Mario palette, you get this creamy shade here that's not all like a solid white, and it's not a cream or an ivory. So in the Patrick Ta palette, you get this kind of traditional bone ivory color, and then you get this true white. You don't get that in the Mario palette. You do get this cream, but it's more, it's kind of, I guess, in between the two shades in the Patrick palette. So here you have the Mario shade, then you have the ivory and the white from Patrick Ta. So definitely similar to the white. This one is just has a little bit more warmth to it. It's not this traditional white, which I love personally, that is in the Patrick Ta palette, and it's a great white. When I used it in look 1, it's a very opaque, true white. So I love that they put that there. So I do like in the Patrick Ta palette, you get a variation there. Whereas really in the Mario palette, you get that one. And then the only other one that's kind of similar is this peachy color here, but that is not really similar to the more ivory color. So this is the peachy color from Mario. the more white color from Mario, the ivory from Patrick Ta, and the white from Patrick Ta. So similar, but this one definitely has like a peachier undertone, whereas that one's a little bit more yellow, golden bone color. All right, you also in the Mario palette, you get this shade here, which is kind of like a reddish brown. It has a pretty red undertone. You get this brown up here that's pretty warm, more of like an orangey brown. So those two I would like to swatch next to like this shade in this palette. And then I don't know, the orangier brown is not really as light as this, and it's not as dark as this. This is, I don't know. I don't think they're exactly the same tones, but I want to swatch those two from the Mario palette. All right, so these are not like the greatest swatches, but you have the Mario shades here. So that one Mario is definitely pretty red, like I was saying. Then the more yellow brown, I guess is the closest to the second lightest shade in the Patrick palette. So the warmer light brown kind of transition shade. But still, this is not quite as warm yellow as this. I feel like that leans a little bit more neutral. It's warm, but I would say like neutral warm. Then you have the second or the third darkest matte in the warm, and then you have the fourth darkest matte in the warm section of Patrick Ta. So I don't know. Overall, the tones, I don't think they're the same. I think obviously they're matte palettes, so that makes them similar, but the overall colors and tones I feel like are a different vibe. I also want to swatch the brown and the black in here as compared to the brown and black in the Patrick Ta palette. So on top here you have the Mario black and the brown, and then the Patrick Ta brown and the black. They're the same colors. I feel like the Patrick Ta has just slightly more pigment than the Master Mattes palette. Now, my Mario palette is older. It's not like a fresh palette. I've had it for a few years. I do think the Patrick palette has just a little bit more pigment than the Mario palette, but they're pretty comparable, and these are just swatches. Obviously, it matters how they apply on your eyes, and I've used the Master Mattes and now the Patrick palette, and they both apply beautifully. I think the formula from the Mario palette is also very good, and that's kind of what I want to talk about a little bit next is the formula of the two. So the Patrick Ta, first of all, it has a lot of kick up in the pan. When you stick your brush in, there's a lot of kick up there. It's not as tightly packed, the shadow in the Patrick Ta palette. The Mario palette is much more densely pressed shadow, so you don't get that amount of pickup. But the Patrick Ta palette, I would say, is a little bit of a softer formula, just a little bit. They both blend impeccably, so I think the blend is there on either one, but the Patrick is just a little bit more loose, a little bit softer, more of a velvety finish. The Mario is, like I said, more tightly pressed, and the formula overall, even in the swatch, just feels a little bit thinner. It's not that powdery kind of buttery feel that you get from the Patrick Ta, but the way they apply, both are beautiful. I don't think you would be disappointed in either. I will say personally, I like this palette from Mario, but I don't use this palette very often. The colors in here don't speak to me like on an everyday basis, and I don't really know why, because they're neutrals, they're matte neutrals. I just find I don't reach for these tones as much, and I think it's because they lean, like I was saying, very yellow and red. I don't get many like true neutral feeling shades in here. I feel like they lean one way or the other a lot. So I don't use this palette much. When I do use it, it performs really well. It's a great palette. I think it would be great if you're a makeup artist. If you are doing bridal makeup, I think this is a great palette. It's also a great companion palette just to pair with other things. It's a great palette. I just don't personally reach for mine a ton. I find, or I personally think, I will use this palette. In fact, when I finish filming this video, I am probably going to put this in my everyday makeup container that sits here just because I know these are shades that I will use. I will use all of these shades. Now, will I do like this kind of smoky eye on a daily basis? No. But will I use like these 4 shades here all the time? Absolutely. I just love that you get the warm and the cool shades in here. I feel like I can get anything that I need here, and you get the creams. You can use as bases or as eyeliner. Last thing I did want to compare is the original Major Dimension palette. So if you watch my videos, you know how much I love this palette. It's one of my favorites, if not my favorite, in my collection. And I want to swatch these two, so the second shade and this third shade here, and compare them to the lighter mattes in the new palette. So I wanted to compare those to these two, so this one here and this one here. So this is from Major Dimension 1, so the second shade and the third shade. And then this is the new palette, second shade and third shade in the warm row. So they are similar. I would say the new or the warmer shade from the newer palette is a little bit more like a peachy warm matte. This one to me from the original is a little bit more neutral, like a true neutral light brown. These two shades are pretty similar. This one might be just like a hair more red maybe than the newer one, but these are definitely pretty similar. So on the eyes, they're gonna look pretty similar to the newer palette. This palette, you obviously get more of the shimmer shades. You get the toppers and then these more metallic shades here. You also get mattes in here that are a little bit glittery. So they look and they feel like a matte, but they do have really fine shimmer in there. This like white creamy color. I love that one in here. So depending on what you're looking for, you might prefer one over the other. But overall, do I think the palette is great? Yes, I do. Do I think it is worth the money? I personally do, but again, take what I say and what anyone else on YouTube says with a grain of salt, because everybody looks at makeup and what they buy or what they don't buy differently. It depends on your preferences, your collection. Do you just like the brand? For me, I love Patrick Ta and I love Patrick Ta's brand. So anything he comes out with, I'm gonna buy it just because I love him. And this happens to be something I think I will continue to use. But as I said, take what I say and what everyone else says with a grain of salt. But I can confidently say now that this is great quality. I had no issues with it, and I personally am happy to have it in my collection because I think I'll continue using it. So I hope this video was helpful or at least enjoyable for you. I know I'm a little late with this palette, but I have to do a video on a new Patrick Ta palette because like I said, he's my favorite and I love the brand. So I hope you enjoyed it. I will have the palette and all the makeup from all 3 looks listed below for you if you are curious. I do use affiliate links, so I do make a commission if you shop through the links. That supports me and this channel, so thank you so much if you do that. Make sure to subscribe and follow me over on Instagram at simply.blair and TikTok simply.blair1, and I will see you next time. Remember, simply be you. Bye.